I'm not sure what happened. Maybe your afternoon tea was so exciting, but we're running a little late. But that's okay. I still plan to have us all out of the room at 4 because it's Friday and it's been a long week. You're coming in this direction? Do you want to speak? Oh, right. So the first thing I'd like to do is invite our plenary panel to come down and sit in our lovely chairs here, if that's okay. Yeah, Rob Hales, Moira Williams, Brendan Mackey, Jason Byrne. Come on down. Yay! So let me just quickly outline what the plan is. Because we're a late start, we will have our fabulous plenary folks still have about 30 minutes to run through, I guess, the overview of the workshops from this morning and this afternoon. My instructions earlier were incorrect, so these guys are going to talk about all of the cool things that came out of different workshops, apparently. No? Lois, would you like to come and clarify? And then, okay.
What I'm hoping is that on the screen shortly we'll get 12 actions from the workshops that everybody's been to, and we'll ask our expert panel here to comment on them, and maybe we'll get some community interaction as well, and then we'll give you each 30 to 60 seconds to summarise how you felt about today. Thank you.
In which case, are they all the points on the one slide? Okay.
Only actions number 1. Okay, otherwise we'll have too many.
Just everybody on action 1, or
Anybody on the panel can talk about any of the number 1 actions.
I've got it. The first action under each.
So I'll step aside now and let these guys read the actions and respond. I think that's what I'm doing. Great. Microphones. We have 30 minutes for the whole session, and I believe that you are responding to the action points. This is the actions from this morning, and then there'll be another set of slides. So how about we go 15 minutes to respond about these and talk about these, and then we'll look at the next ones.
I think there's 6 workshops, there's 12 workshops.
But how many slides? Okay, whatever you want. So there's the 2 slides.
So how much time do we have?
30 minutes in total.
Total? For?
You know, or we could just get the panel to fight each other for the yeah.
I'm going to talk about the community climate change.
Okay.
Obviously, I'll do the first one.
Second page. Let's go to the next slide.
Who's got the doobie? Have you got the clicky? Oh. Okay. Over to our wonderful panel. Thanks, guys.
Okay, well, hello.
Is it on?
I believe so. Could I just suggest we just go through the slides again? If we just go to the first page of slides, and has everyone had time to read them? Maybe the second page. And the next one. and there's a last one, right? Okay, I've been asked to make a comment about this. I just want to maybe talk about one, and that's the first point, community-led climate plan. I wasn't at that workshop, but the idea has a lot of appeal to me. I think the rationale for it to me seems quite sound. We no longer have a Gold Coast formal climate change strategy, let alone some kind of plan. I think everyone in the room here, we're all accustomed to and very good at telling our local government what we don't want to happen. I think a community-led climate change plan would be an opportunity for us to discuss and share and articulate what we do want to happen. And it can also be a spatial plan, and it can say where we want those good things to happen. And the advantage of a community-led climate plan is it gives us a focal point for our discussions. It enables us to talk with people right across the community about the whole array of issues we have to deal with, mitigation and adaptation, the technology issues, the financing issues, everything that people are debating at the macro level we need to be thinking about here at the micro level. It a planning approach enables us to focus on issues rather than personalities. It enables us to really articulate what the values are that we care about, and it enables us to explore options that looks at the option or a multiple of options that can help deliver on some of those values, and it can come up with something tangible that can then be taken to governments, that can then be used for advocacy work, etc. So I really like the idea of a community-led climate plan. I hope GECO has a good think about that. In terms of my role at Griffith University, it's something I'd be interested to lend our support to in some tangible way.
Just like to add a couple of comments on to Brendan, if I may. One of the interesting things that came up in our discussion, which you would have seen as the first one, looking at change in organisations, and it's also come up with some of the other speakers today, is that we have a changing ideology and changing political parties. And one of the things that in terms of trying to champion climate change, one of the things that we have to ensure is that we have some enduring institutions that continue across the different political diversity that we have, from conservative to more liberal, small L governments. And that's, I think a good thing about what you're saying, Brendan.
I'm going to put Moira on the spot. What I love about the idea of a community-led climate plan is that there's so much passion, so much knowledge out there with everybody in this room and your friends and the other people you talk to, that we can harness that energy that you have of looking at the internet all the time. We can harness our students here at Griffith with projects. We can harness our own abilities and capacities. But how do we make sure that the decision makers act on it? And one renegade in our group who immediately appealed to me with their radical idea was to divest from council as ratepayers. Right, so civil disobedience if some of these plans are not put into place. So I'm wondering if you might be able to comment about that as an idea.
Sure. Love it. Yeah, and I like the focus of the facilitators on, making action points out of this conference. I think there's, we've been talking for a lot of years about climate action, and the challenge is finding ways for ordinary people to tap into campaigns that are really going to make a difference. So I guess my general comment on all of those actions is they're really great actions. To see a bottom-up approach is fantastic, but I encourage you to kind of join with a local group, get connected with other groups in your area, because it's only with that collective power that we're going to defeat very powerful opposition in the fossil fuel industry. And I think from a 350 perspective, that is our approach. We don't believe in the timeframes we need we're going to get change from the government, regardless of who's voted in on Saturday. You know, the reality is we have 10 years, you know, and we had 10 years 10 years ago. So, you know, we don't see effective lobbying at any level really delivering the change we need. We think civil disobedience is a really important part of, you know, disobeying the status quo, I guess, and I really like that idea. Last month we held globally one of the biggest civil disobediences in the world, where 2,000 people shut down the Newcastle coal port, one of the largest coal ports in the world, and across the globe was the largest civil disobedience on climate. This is the kind of action, you know, our actions have to meet the urgency of the crisis we're facing, and I think if we continue to, you know, look to an iterative approach that's going to fiddle around the edges, you know, we're going to be in the same spot we are in 10 years' time, and we will have missed, you know, a critical opportunity to actually put this issue on the table. So I love the idea of not just doing civil disobedience, you know, on coal infrastructure, but bringing it into everyday lives. So I'm not going to participate in a system that is actively funding the destruction we're seeing around us. So love it.
Okay.
But, you know, we all live where we live, and we have to engage with the system that we have. And here on the Gold Coast, you know, it's our local government that has statutory responsibilities for planning and infrastructure and all the good things that we're talking about here. So again, you know, I think in terms of finding a way of constructively taking all the energy and creativity that's here and giving it some focus and coming up with an instrument that can be used for further kind of advocacy work. I think a community-led climate plan, you know, is a good idea. But Rob, how do we engage? What about the business sector? And I'm thinking here of kind of the Gold Coast-based business sector. How would we go about? Because they're part of the community, they're part of the local economy. How would we go about engaging them in such a plan, do you think?
Seems like a $1 million question. Do I get $1 million if I answer correctly? It's a tricky question. I was actually thinking, because you gave me the question before you actually asked it just then. I was thinking in terms of engaging, how do larger corporations actually engaging with this? And I think the stranded assets phenomenon is the thing that's really kicked business into action. As to how stranded these assets actually are is the big question. I mean, how quickly are these assets going to be stranded? And that question drives the agenda, really. In terms of the small businesses, I think that's the black hole here, I think. And we came across that in the earlier question and also in the discussions that we had in the group that I was facilitating, that there are a number of actions that say there are industry associations that are doing good work in this area that you can tap into that most businesses know about, really along the lines of eco-efficiency. But if I could take that question a little bit and segue it into, we could go back up to the first point about organisations. Is anyone in charge of the... There we go. Thanks. I changed the topic away from innovation and thought about in organisations how we can actually facilitate change, because recent understandings about how change occurs in organisations, there's an alternative operating system happening underneath where you have champions, eco-champions or whatever you'd like to call them, running within the organisation to try and get up sustainability agenda items into the organisation at a higher level and on board. And I think this may be where in small, or at least medium enterprises, this is one of the opportunities here, is tapping into those alternative networks. So our group turned into a network and sharing ideas about how we can actually make progressive change in the organisations. And it was interesting, we had people from, there were students, activists, there were people working in government, there were academics, and then we had a politician. We had the Mayor of Byron Shire Council there. So we had a huge range of people, and all, including the Mayor, Simon, are you there? Okay. Yep, there he is. We all found, even when we had a social licence at Burren Shire Council, very good social licence in terms of sustainability, there were roadblocks. And the key to trying to overcome these roadblocks were diverse, and that was the thing we shared. How do we actually move to get action happening within organisations? And those are the 3 points that I put down that resonated with me about new things that we hadn't talked about so far in the conference there. So, you know, when you put together an initiative to council, make sure that the, you know, you're putting in things about the river in which that councillor, you know, goes and enjoys. Put that into the submission. Dress like the actual councillor. Don't come across as some sort of boffin. Things like that. So we got down to the nitty-gritty about how to actually make this happen. So I'd say that that's one of the things. We've all got a number of things we'd like to champion. It's how to actually use that alternative way of getting things up onto the agenda is a key thing, I'd say, as well as the standard approaches which can be facilitated by associations and governments.
Can I just beg everybody's indulgence with an example? We can look to countries in the developing world like India, and we might not think about them having expertise in climate change adaptation. India is in serious trouble at the moment with the drought that they have, the mega drought. But we can see solutions coming out of places like this that small businesses on the Gold Coast could embrace as well. So for about $100, you can have, using off-the-shelf technology, you can have a biogas digester hooked up to your toilet, hooked up to your kitchen, which then uses methane to power lighting in your house, to power your stove, to cook. You start to close some of these loops. I'm wondering, you know, just using this as an example, like begging your indulgence, if we had a community-led plan where one of the elements there is waste management, talking the way that a large institution would talk, but we offer business-based solutions like this one, if that might not be a way forward. You know, always with the sting in the tail that we divest if they don't like what we're saying. What do you think about something like that, Rob, where you bring those two together?
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. Yeah, I think I'm wondering whether, at any stage, there's a number of people out there that are in the groups, and there's a number of points up there. If anyone, maybe we should lend it out to people. Yeah.
So, does anyone here have any reflections on any of the points that have come up, or have any of the points struck you, or are there any points that you had raised in the workshops that aren't there?
Yeah, I think it's all been watered down too much from the discussions. Of course, I'm the radical in the workshop that actually suggested that we should sue the council. We should look into suing the council for not having a climate change plan and possibly have a campaign to stop paying rates. That would scare the hell out of them. I'm not suggesting people lose their houses by not paying their rates, but some American students have successfully sued the authorities for not putting things in place, and I think we should look very seriously, because we're past the tipping point and we're past it really being academic discussion, and something to come out of this has to be really firm, strong, radical, or I just feel I'm wasting my time, because we're way past it, and it's debatable as to whether or not this 2% could ever be reached anyway. But until there's a real move to have all the sustainable industries legislated for and all the non-sustainable industries legislated against, it's got to happen. It's got to be firm, radical, and now. And look at okay, we've got to work with the system, but we can use the legal system to try and sue the corrupt council system, for starters. And the state government seems to be doing its best to do something, and hopefully there'll be a federal government that hopefully will follow suit. But I'm not an optimist. And, you know, this is all being watered down. You know, if I go to a workshop, so, you know, as a suggestion, have something radical as a suggestion, I don't want to see it watered down into more words and academic, pontification. It's too late for that.
Well, can we maybe hand over to someone who's used to being radical and get a comment from a panel member?
I mean, I'm a big believer in, find where your strengths are and go with that, and find where your energy and passion lies. I mean, there's people in this room that are planners, that are engineers, that are, health professionals, and they're going to have their own strengths and connections that they can bring to this movement. If you feel passionate about that, we need to be bold and taking radical action, and, especially litigation has played a really critical role. In the US, they've used it to fantastic effect to stop a whole bunch of new coal-fired power stations. There's strategies for every context, and I think there's strategies and groups for every individual in this movement, because I think, there's the movement theory that you need to be having the radicals saying at this end, but then you also need that to be backing up and playing the system at the same time, so that when you get that public pressure in, there's a plan, whether that's the community-led plan, something ready to go as a result of that public action. So, don't be disheartened. Everyone has a different theory of change, but we're all pushing in the same direction.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to, connect a few dots on the idea of, which I love, of a community-led climate change plan. And some of the dots that I've kind of picked up on today, I think, offer some really cool solutions or some really awesome touch points for the plan. The first one picking up on the greenhouse gas emissions budget and looking at, for example, where Gold Coast would need to be if it was, to work within that kind of equitable share of emissions, aiming towards that 2-degree target. Another point that I picked up on was kind of related to that, but was about being carbon zero in a couple of years, and how that would look for us personally and also as organisations. And articulating quite a tangible target that we can be working towards. The other lovely ideas that I picked up from Rob Bishop's session this afternoon was the climate of change, so really changing the terminology. And I love his idea about putting the call out and celebrating all the awesome stuff that's already happening. So really kind of painting that picture about what a full canvas we have of fantastic stuff. We're very active. Get on board because you're missing out.
Can I just respond over here to the issue of activism? One of the things that's happened since the 80s is that all of the graduates, all of those fired up environmentalists back then, have been either burnt out or they've been subsumed into environmental roles. And when they are subsumed into environmental roles, they have to be careful of where they are in their context politically. So, but that doesn't mean to say that whatever your position is, you're not an activist, because there are a number of people in this room that would not appear to be activists, but behind the scenes they are feeding information, they are backing, they are supporting, and they are out there doing things, but we're not on the front line. And I think that has to be acknowledged, that we've had a shift in the number of people and the types of people that are doing this work. And the other thing I think that's amazing is the alternative media that we have now. Our networks of knowledge are coming through not mainstream channels of media. We're all linked in various social media sites, and we find out all this information before it really comes onto the main networks to us. So that element also has an amazing organising feature, and people know about that. We've talked about this already. Thanks.
Hello, Nina. My name. It's just a general comment that people expect the government to do everything, or organisations like ECO or whatever, Griffith University, to do something about it. But also it's up to the individual person to live sustainably. It's very easy to buy an iPad every 6 months and to not be serious about recycling or whatever, or e-waste. that individually we can make a difference, and we all need to live sustainably ourselves and not think it's another person's problem. A lot of Australians rely on the government to make changes, but they're not. But then they're the ones that make the law, so you still have to lobby the government. But I think we all need to live sustainably ourselves. And your practices at home, there are lots of different areas. Like, look, think of e-waste, and whenever you buy those next computer and anything like that, look at whether you're just chucking in the bin or actually trying to get it to recycle centres. And the Gold Coast City Council have very good transfer station, Helensvale, Mulladyna, for paints and lots of different things. So basically it's a community effort, but I think we need to also work as an individual person and live sustainably ourselves and not just think it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah. You want to say that? Well, I think the round of applause says we're all in agreement in their wise words. I think it's very true that every, whichever non-state actor you are, remember we're all non-state actors. Griffith University is a non-state actor, and Rob's actually in charge of a really interesting process at Griffith, which is trying to do our campus, our university-wide carbon account. And I think you could probably tell everyone what our single largest source of carbon emissions is, which I think is a really interesting one for us academics to be aware of.
Yes, before that, I'd just like to say yes, our individual actions are huge, and I think the biggest activist effort that I've done in my entire life has been a vegetarian since I was 18, because every time I sit down, I talk about environmental issues, because people back then thought that was very weird to be a vegetarian. Not now so much, but still you have the conversation, so yeah. Yeah. So, yes, buildings are probably the largest, but an equal second is our carbon footprint from airline travel. And academics are hopeless at emitting carbon. And one of the things that we're doing here at Griffith University, as like other universities, is trying to think about how we can deal with this, because it's our job to have impact, international impact, but that means connecting with people. So I'm actually writing a paper about this and how we can overcome this problem. Yeah. And as part of my job, I'm trying to do it in our business school as well.
Hello, thank you. My name's Paul, and I just want to acknowledge that we're in a company of some amazing people. So thank you. I don't want to take up too long, but Paul Bishop, I facilitated the conversation about South East Queensland EcoChallenge, which is really just talking about what are the great things that people are doing. I'm a local councillor and I represent residents in Birkdale, Thornside, low-lying, coastal, and I think there's some really important stuff about a ground-up, bottom-up approach to climate strategy that's really important, that actually starts to look at some of the statutory views on where the freeboard is involved, whether the 30 centimetre extra bit above the 0.08. There's so much conjecture out there. There's not even clarity yet from the state government. The emergency disaster management guys are really concerned down the track about some of the implications if we don't get it right. So I think a bottom-up approach is really important. One of the things that I think is going to be quite interesting as we start to get bottom-up policy is to tie it with the top-down and get really interesting inside-out logical solutions. And I actually think there's going to be opportunities down the track to think about cooperatives, insurance claims, where people cooperatively actually disappear out of normal traditional insurance policies and say, listen, my government doesn't have a policy, I'm going to insure myself, and we'll actually set up hedge funds and those sorts of things. So I'm interested in how we map and track the sort of innovative responses to challenges that are coming, and I'm calling it EcoChallenge because it's about economy and ecological sustainability. So just want to tie that in, and I think there might be some crossover with what you guys are doing as we look at what are best practice things. Biodigesters, how do we get them? Where's the website? Who are the people? How can we all have them in our own properties and stuff? And what are the barriers to statutory ability to do it? Let's cut through all that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, rainwater tanks were a really good example, right? Until recently, rainwater tanks were illegal. And then we had a... Right. Then we had a millennium drought and suddenly it's like, oh, no, they're not illegal anymore. Let's everybody have one. So, I think the bottom-up pressure is really important. I love what you're saying. Has anyone heard that the Commonwealth Bank recently are really, really worried about peer-to-peer lending? Yeah? They're actually seriously questioning their own viability as a business because of peer-to-peer lending. There's a real strength here in what we can do together as peers. Crowdsourcing ideas, for example, for overcoming some of these planning barriers. I think if we can work together, that's what human ingenuity is all about. That's the secret for overcoming some of these roadblocks, is to begin to crowdsource from everybody some of these ideas. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that. Yeah?
There's a 2-day workshop on food and cooperatives on the Gold Coast on the 29th and 30th of August. Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals are facilitating that. I've got the details on my PowerPoint, so have a look at that.
So we have time for one more kind of intervention before we have to move to the final closing segment. So
hi, so Zuzia from Griffith. I just had an idea, completely different to what I've been talking about before, but in this climate change for good, I think I'd be interested to know what education we should be doing to educate the future generation about climate change, so that we don't have our, education now, knowledge now is not sort of waned out. So how should we go about teaching our children and carry this on at all levels of education? I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Did anyone want to respond?
There we go. The Australian Youth Climate Coalition have been doing a lot of work in a schools program trying to get climate change into the curriculum when it wasn't there. Check them out. That's all I'm going to say to that one. I'm not a teacher, but it's really important that they were getting the science in there and activating young people.
And offer your local school. So you're an expert, you've got great ideas, you've got great knowledge. Offer to your local headmaster that you're willing to go down and have a chat about this kind of stuff too. You might be surprised.
I can contribute something to that too. I'm actually a teacher, and currently in the national curriculum there is a lot in there on climate change and sustainability. Depending on how you vote tomorrow will influence how that curriculum is going to change, because the current government is proposing to remove it from our national curriculum. State governments do have some control in it, and I've just been away on holiday, but just before I left I was informed that the geography syllabus for Queensland includes and has included things on climate change, but it is under threat at the moment, so it depends really on how we, what we tell our governments what to do. So I do strongly urge you to vote correctly tomorrow.
I'm just going to repeat that because we hadn't handed you a microphone, so the camera may not have caught it. Of course, we're being streamed. This session's being streamed. So a teacher in the audience, whose name is Gina, brought to our attention that currently climate science is in the national geography curriculum.
No, the national curriculum from P to 12.
In the national curriculum from P to 12, but that the Turnbull government is proposing, if re-elected, to have that withdrawn from the national curriculum.
They have people at the moment working on removing it.
They currently have people working on removing it, but it is currently in the Queensland government geography curriculum.
And also in our curriculum generally, yes.
And in our curriculum generally. Well, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. I wasn't aware of that myself.
No.
So, Michelle, back to you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for that lively discussion. I think it's been great that everyone in their different groups have come to some really very sharp-ended ideas about what to do next in the way that we can work together. My job now is to help us wrap up. I'm going to run through a few... That is an interesting and quivering... Is that your slide, Paul? Is that... No? Okay. All right, no worries. Well, we'll just I'm going to just proceed as usual and wrap up for the day, then hand over. Is that what it is? Oh, now we've lost everything. That's okay. Okay, I'm just going to keep focused, okay, because this is my challenge. I'm going to wrap up for the day, but then hand over to Lois to do the very special act of congratulating our Actioneers. So I will leave that lovely privilege to Lois. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for a really excellent day, and I know that the Gecko organisers are really thrilled that so many folks came out on a lovely Friday to share some of these ideas, and we hope that we'll see you all again tomorrow. So perhaps you could all give yourselves a round of applause for being awesome participants. Plus, I'm a great believer that clapping gets one energy back to a nice place. So it's that time of day. A huge thank you to all of the Gecko volunteers. Ali and Lois stressed upon me that I must thank all the volleys. Thank you so much, everybody. And another big thank you to the sponsors, particularly the main sponsors, obviously Gecko, who created and supported it, the Griffith Climate Change Response Program, Brendan and his team, and the Department of Environment. There are also a whole range of other great sponsors and folks, and I'm sure that they're on your lists and on the programs that you've seen. So just a couple of more housekeeping. There's that little slide that's now come up is all about stay connected, and what the lovely folks at Gecko have done is create a couple of Facebook places where you can connect, and I think what they want to do is create a private space for some of the Actioneers and mentors to continue chatting, and obviously stay in touch with the actual climate change organisers, the conference organisers. So is there any other bits and pieces you want to, is that the main Facebook name and things to look up? Okay. Yep. Okay. So the other thing to note, if you can't read it, the website is www.climatechangeforgood.com.au, and you can pop your name down there to be on the mailing list and to stay in touch that way as well. So please do stay connected through and beyond the conference. Some final housekeeping bits and pieces. A reminder that tomorrow the Rare and Threatened Plant Walk is on at 8 a.m. So hopefully you'll be back here for the conference ahead of the 8:30 start. And if you are, definitely join the gang to enjoy that walk. The only other thing I think I have to remind you about is the conference dinner this evening is at 6:30 at the Kurrawa Surf Club at Broadbeach. And if anyone has detailed questions, please do ask Ellie or Lois. So tomorrow is an 8:30 start, and I think that's it from here. What I'd like to do now is hand over to Lois to talk to the auctioneers, the Actioneers. So thanks very much for having me, and I'll see you later. And don't forget your lovely Earth Community Companion. Make sure you leave with one of these lovely free plants and try to fill out a form and become a Gecko supporter.
Well, Michelle, I'd like to thank you for being a wonderful moderator this afternoon and keeping us all moving and engaged and all those good things. We appreciate you taking the time to do that. I'm just going to ask that all those people who put their names down as Actioneers would stand and come down to the front, because we've got a little thing to give you to recognise your commitment to carry on the work that we've started. This, as with all conferences, there are a million things that you can talk about, and there's perhaps a million ideas that you get, but the main thing is to try and carry it forward. The idea of the Actioneers is that you will commit to an action, a small action, a medium one, or a large action, just depends on your level of energy, I guess, time, commitments, all those sorts of things as to what you think you can do, but all of it is valuable. The Actioneers will be mentored by a group of our experts from today and tomorrow, so that they will have the opportunity through a Facebook page to talk through their ideas with these mentors. So if you've got an idea but you're not too sure what the next step is, you can go onto this closed Facebook area and ask the questions, and one of the experts will hopefully be able to help you move to the next stage. So we don't want just a talk fest. We want to move the conference forward, and hopefully we'll all be back in 12 months' time to see how we went with those actions. Did we get our community-led climate plan up? Did we manage to convince businesses that they actually need a climate strategy of their own and a sustainability strategy of their own? So all of these kind of things can happen, will happen, because all of you are energetic or you wouldn't be here. All of you are committed or you wouldn't be here. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming, for contributing, and for going forward and taking the ideas from here out into your community and your fields of interest. It's been inspiring for me to see you all here, and I really appreciate that. So could we have our Actioneers standing? Come on. Would you like to come forward, please? I saw a lot more names on those sheets, so if you put your name down on one of those Actioneers sheets, you should be down here.